All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into consciousness.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is, and we've got a really fascinating mix of sources for this one.
Really?
Yeah, we've got scientific papers, spiritual texts, even a nod to Interstellar, believe it or not.
Wow, that's quite a range.
Yeah,
Well,
and our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to try to help all of us understand what this thing we call consciousness actually is,
okay.
why it matters so much, and how different fields of thought approach it.
It's pretty amazing how, even with all those different approaches, there still seems to be that common thread,
Yeah.
that acknowledgement that consciousness exists.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's something that we experience in so many different ways.
Right.
You think about how we shift between being wide awake or totally lost in a dream or just completely knocked out of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It really makes you wonder, like, what is that part of you that's experiencing all these different states?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And that's what the source material refers to as pure consciousness.
Okay.
One way to think about it, one of the sources talks about the Vedantic tradition, and they use this idea of the observer and the observed.
Okay.
Can you unpack that a little for me?
Sure. So imagine you're looking at a car, right? You are the observer.
Yeah, okay.
The car is the object. You're aware of the car,
Yeah.
but you know that you are not the car itself.
Right.
And so you can even apply this idea to your thoughts and feelings too, right?
Mhm.
If you can observe them, then that must mean that you're not just your thoughts or your feelings.
Okay.
There's something separate that's doing the observing, and that, according to Vedanta, is a glimpse of pure consciousness.
So this observer is kind of like the core of who we are,
Yeah.
separate from all those, ever-changing thoughts and experiences.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And what's even more interesting is that this concept actually seems to align with some of the things that Professor Donald Hoffman
Okay.
is finding in his scientific research.
Oh.
So he suggests that what we perceive as reality, like what we see, hear, touch, taste,
Yeah.
all that, might actually just be a tiny sliver
Yeah.
of what's really out there.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying there's like a whole other reality that we're just like missing out on?
Kind of.
What
Yeah.
does that even mean?
Okay, well, think of it this way. Like, imagine if reality was like a vast ocean,
Okay.
and all of our senses, right, everything we can perceive, it only lets us experience the surface waves.
Okay.
So Hoffman's work is suggesting that there's this entire underwater world,
Uh-huh.
like teeming with life, that we are normally just completely unaware of.
Oh, that's a pretty mind-blowing concept.
It is.
So we're basically living in like a simplified version of reality. Why would our brains do that to us?
Well, Hoffman believes it's all about survival.
Right. Okay.
So our brains have just evolved over time to only show us this version of reality that is actually useful for, like, navigating the world, and not necessarily the full unfiltered picture.
So it's like our brains are giving us the Reader's Digest version of reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the highlights.
Just the highlights.
Okay, but if we are capable of experiencing pure consciousness, like that observer we were talking about, then how do we tap into that, like that underwater world?
Well, that's where a lot of these spiritual traditions, like the one we just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
they use practices like meditation
Yeah.
to quiet the mind and access this deeper level of awareness.
Mm.
So it's all about tuning out the noise
Mm.
of those surface waves,
Right.
so you can actually perceive what lies beneath.
Interesting. So we've got, ancient spiritual practices and modern science,
Right.
both pointing towards this idea of a deeper reality. And it's not just limited to these fields either.
Yeah.
It even pops up in popular culture sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, remember that line from Interstellar,
Right.
where Dr. Brand talks about love as this force that transcends time and space?
Right.
Never thought a sci-fi movie would make me rethink love and reality.
Yeah, exactly.
But this idea that love exists beyond our normal perception, it kind of makes you wonder if maybe love is a way of accessing that underwater world.
That's a really fascinating connection.
Yeah.
Maybe love allows us to experience that deeper level of reality, that interconnectedness that pure consciousness seems to be pointing toward.
We're getting pretty deep here, but stay with us.
Yeah.
Next, we'll explore how religion tackles these ideas and what all of this could mean for how we actually live our lives.
Sounds good. So we've seen how spiritual traditions and even science, are hinting at the idea that there's more to reality than meets the eye.
Right.
But now let's see where religion fits into all of this.
Okay, yeah, because the source material points out that pretty much every religion out there has some concept of a higher power,
Right.
a God who created everything.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how this idea of God,
Yeah.
right, actually aligns with what we were just talking about with pure consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about God as this like ultimate, all-encompassing consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
then everything that we experience, the good, the bad, our struggles, our joys, our triumphs,
Yeah.
it can all be seen as kind of expressions of that, the divine consciousness.
So it's like we're all these little pieces of a much bigger puzzle,
Yeah.
and we all have our own little part to play in this grand cosmic scheme of things.
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
You okay?
And even though, different religions might use different language or stories to describe this connection,
Yeah.
that core concept of like a fundamental consciousness
Mm-hmm.
weaving through everything, it stays pretty consistent.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter if it's Brahman in Hinduism or the Tao in Taoism
Right.
or the Great Spirit in indigenous traditions.
Exactly.
The idea is the same. There's this underlying force that connects us all.
Mhm.
It's wild to think that all these belief systems that have been shaping civilizations for centuries could actually all be talking about the same truth.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
Like we're seeing this convergence of religion and science,
Yeah.
both pointing to the same peak, even though they took completely different paths to get there.
Exactly. Like all roads lead to Rome, right?
Uh-huh.
But in this case, it seems like all roads lead to consciousness.
And so if this idea of like a shared consciousness is real,
Right.
what does that even mean for like how we treat each other?
That's a good question.
Like if we're all connected on this really deep level,
Yeah.
wouldn't that mean that harming someone else is ultimately like harming ourselves too?
It really does make you rethink the whole concept of individual responsibility.
Yeah.
If our actions ripple out and affect the whole,
Yeah.
our choices, they take on a whole new level of significance.
It's funny, when we were talking about Professor Hoffman's work earlier
Yeah.
and how our brains might be simplifying reality for us,
Right.
it makes me wonder if maybe that limited perception is also what contributes to,
Uh-huh.
conflict and suffering in the world. Like, what if we could see the full picture, that interconnectedness?
Right.
Maybe we'd all act a lot differently.
It makes you wonder if those like glimpses of pure consciousness, those moments where we feel connected to something so much bigger than ourselves,
Yeah.
if those are actually glimpses of a truer reality,
Okay.
the one that we're usually blinded to.
It's like we're all wearing these virtual reality headsets, right?
Oh, totally.
And every once in a while we get a peek outside the simulation.
Exactly. And maybe those little glimpses are what inspire things like love, compassion,
Right.
altruism, those actions that go beyond just self-preservation.
Yeah. It's a pretty powerful way to think about it.
It is.
Maybe those moments of connection are what remind us of our true nature, that we're not just these isolated individuals fighting for scraps,
Yeah.
but we're actually these integral parts of something so much grander and more meaningful.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've looked at how consciousness is understood in spiritual traditions, in religion,
Right.
and even in science. But what does all this actually mean for us,
Right.
Like, how does understanding consciousness change the way we live our lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
If consciousness is truly this fundamental thing, right?
Yeah.
If it underlies everything that we experience,
Mm-hmm.
then understanding it could have some really profound implications for how we interact with the world,
Okay.
how we treat each other,
Yeah.
and even how we make sense of our own existence.
Yeah. I'm starting to see how this deep dive isn't just about some, like, abstract concept,
Right.
but it's really about getting to the heart of what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we're going to explore some of those potential implications of this understanding of consciousness for our everyday lives and the choices that we make.
Okay, so I think it's safe to say we've covered some pretty mind-bending territory in this deep dive.
We have.
Everything from like this idea of pure consciousness to the possibility that what we see as reality is, just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. And we've seen how these ideas resonate across all these different traditions and disciplines, like spiritual traditions, religions, even modern science.
Yeah.
It really seems like there's this convergence happening with all these different disciplines all kind of pointing towards a similar truth.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yes.
But I'm really curious about the so what now, like how does understanding all of this actually change how we live our lives?
Well, if we take seriously this idea that consciousness is fundamental, right? That it's like the ground of all being.
Okay.
Then it really, I think, completely reframes our understanding of who we are and how we relate to the world. It suggests that we're not just these isolated individuals, but we're interconnected beings,
Right.
participating in this vast web of awareness.
So instead of seeing ourselves as separate competing entities, it's more like we're all just like individual expressions of the same underlying consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And that shift in perspective, I think, has really profound applications.
Okay. Like what?
Well, I mean, if we're all connected on this deeper level,
Yeah.
then compassion and empathy and kindness,
Mm-hmm.
they become more than just these moral ideals.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They become expressions of our fundamental interconnectedness.
It's like recognizing that harming someone else is ultimately harming yourself too.
Exactly.
Like we were saying earlier.
It really makes you rethink this whole idea of self-interest,
Right.
Like, what does that even mean in the context of this interconnected web of consciousness?
Yeah. And it makes me think about when we were talking about that quote from Interstellar earlier.
Oh, yeah.
About love being this force that transcends time and space.
Right.
Maybe love isn't just a feeling, but it's actually like a way of tapping into that interconnectedness,
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
Perhaps love is what allows us to just for a moment break free from this illusion of separation and actually experience the unity that underlies all things.
It's like those glimpses of pure consciousness, those moments when you feel connected to something so much bigger than yourself.
Exactly, yeah.
And if that's the case, then cultivating love and compassion,
Right.
it becomes more than just, a nice thing to do. It's a way of aligning ourselves with the fundamental nature of reality.
Precisely. And that alignment, it can have these ripple effects throughout our lives.
Yeah.
It influences how we interact with others, how we approach challenges, how we even make sense of our own existence.
So it sounds like understanding consciousness isn't just about expanding our minds, but it's also about transforming our hearts.
I like that. Well said. And that brings us to a final thought for everyone listening out there to ponder.
Right.
If consciousness truly is this fundamental reality, this ground of being, what does that mean for your everyday choices, your experiences?
Yeah.
How might this understanding shape how you live your life?
Yeah.
How you interact with others?
Right.
How you navigate the ups and downs that inevitably come with, being human?
It's a really powerful question to leave us with, and it feels like, we've only just begun to explore this,
I guess so too.
this vast and mysterious ocean of consciousness.
Indeed, but I think even just a glimpse into these depths can be transformative.
I agree. So thank you all for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of consciousness.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
We hope this deep dive has kind of sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring these really profound questions. Until next time, keep diving deep.